I want to welcome all of you to this Global Genes webinar, Making Sense of Your Dollars. I'm Daniel Levine, principal of Levine Media Group and host of Global Genes Rarecast. And it's my pleasure to be moderating today's panel featuring Lori and Pat Bergmeyer from 1847 Financial, which provides financial planning to individuals and families. Lori and Pat are experienced at dealing with advising families with children who have special needs, and they're going to lend us their expertise today. I'd like to thank today's sponsors, Horizon Pharma, for its support of the webinar, and I'd also like to thank the staff of Global Genes, and in particular Ashley Yee, for her great work putting together and coordinating today's program. This webinar is meant to be interactive. I encourage people watching this live to use the instant messenger in the right-hand corner of their screens to send questions for the panel as we go. I'll do my best to work these questions into our conversation. We'll also try to save some time at the end for questions from the audience. We're discussing financial planning. I do want to say up front that the focus of today's webinar will be on long-term planning for children with special needs. Understand that people dealing with a rare disease or a family member with a rare disease face great financial pressures as they struggle to afford care, balance their work and life, and bear their immediate financial burdens. While we're got some resources along the way, by and large, today's discussion is on long-term planning and the considerations parents will need to make about ensuring a child with special needs the resources to get the care he or she will need throughout their lifetime. Today we're going to change our usual format a bit. Our panelists will begin with a presentation, and then the usual back and forth we do. I've asked both of them to present before the discussion begins. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lori Leathers and Pat Bergmeyer of 1847 Financial. Lori is an advisor with 1847 Financial. Before entering the financial services industry, Lori was a pharmaceutical sales representative, but when her son was diagnosed with Fragile X, that led to her making a career change as she sought to help other families navigate the planning process. Is a chartered special needs consultant with 1847 Financial and a certified financial planner. They're going to give us a look at the types of issues parents preparing for a child with special needs should consider, some of the instruments and resources they may want to avail themselves of, and some of the pitfalls to avoid. With that, Pat, Lori, please take it away.
Thank you much, Danny. This is Liz, and I wanted to just start with a little bit more background about my experience and how I entered into the special planning field. I am a mother of two children diagnosed with Fragile X. My 16-year-old son is the one that's primarily impacted by Fragile X, and he does have an intellectual disability. His name is Abe, and he was diagnosed at 3 years old in 2004. At that time, I was a pharmaceutical sales rep. I had been with Merck Pharmaceuticals for 19 years, so my entire career. And at that time, after my son's diagnosis, I was able to stay with Merck for many years because I was in field sales, and that afforded me the flexibility they needed in order to meet the challenging needs of in terms of no appointments, people into the home for early intervention, et cetera. That being said, I just wanted to throw that out there because it is important to care that when a family has a child that's diagnosed with a rare genetic condition, obviously there's a lot of different impact on the family, including this one, which is the financial impact. And oftentimes that causes one parent to stay home and help manage the child's needs. So again, you'll see a lot of times that the professionals that are in the special needs professional world often have personal experiences themselves, either through parents or siblings that they have with special needs. The supportive partner or family member, that's going to allow one of the individuals to more support the needs of the child. So I want some of the points that Danny had presented to me before going into the exact slide deck. Being at what point should consider the assistance of a financial advisor. And I'll just get that out there that as soon as possible, once you have a diagnosis and believe that it's a possibility, hard for us to know for sure always, but if you believe that there's a possibility that your child will need supports and services throughout their adult life, in addition to when they're in the schools, then you want to start talking and considering financial planning for a child with special needs. So I'm going to go into the slide deck now to start in on some of the factors that need to be considered. Okay, things that we now are, what's important to ourselves as caregivers of a child with special needs. And I think most of us would agree that maintaining not only the lifetime care, put a care plan in place, but maintaining the quality of life for a loved one is a priority. And you want to be able to have peace of mind when you're no longer around or no longer able to provide for your child's needs. Important part of this picture is protecting and maximizing any government benefits that are available, either federally and or through the state. And also want to plan for the successful retirement of the caregivers. So if there's a two-parent household and you have a child with special needs, often what you need to plan for is what we call a three-person retirement. Because it's likely that your child needs supports and services to support their adulthood. So you want to be able to maximize government benefits, but then supplement what benefits don't cover by doing your own individual family financial planning. Other things that we'll mention along the way are how would you like to provide for any neurotypical siblings that might be in the household. And, of course, always we want to minimize the impact of taxes or Uncle Sam. So is that a majority of the time, families of children with special needs have not planned sufficiently. There's a number of reasons for this. First of all, it might just be logistical in terms of lack of coordination among your family's advisors, including attorneys, tax and financial planners, insurance leaders, government services, et cetera. So there's a lot of different what are often silos that we want to break down those silos and get everybody communicating together and on the same page. And that's one of the important things that a financial advisor can do. It's one that is familiar with special needs planning day in and day out. An obstacle. You want to make sure, and Pat will address this also toward the webinar, but how do you identify an appropriate special planner? Obstacle is you might have a plan, you have a will, or it's outdated, hasn't been dusted off for a few years, and of course things change year to year. So we want to make sure that we are able to keep up with those in our legal documents. And I think the most common one is simply procrastination. And this is what I mentioned up front, that the sooner you're aware of the potential your child will need supports throughout their adulthood, that's when you need to start thinking about planning and start gathering information. Because we all know that every day we're putting out fires when we're caregivers with special needs. However, it's very important to step back and consider the bigger picture so that when they are about to enter into adulthood and leave the school system, they're going to have a place that you're happy with, that meets needs and your goals for your child. So we'll kind of go through a pop quiz. I'm going to go through these slides briefly, and just to mention that there's three different areas of planning that we want to consider monitor and coordinate. And again, those are the legal, through an appropriate special needs estate planning attorney, government fits and care management, and financial, which is directly what someone like Pat and myself do. Estate planning documents that your attorney will prepare for you are wills, your financial and medical powers of attorneys, and trusts, including a special needs trust. There are a lot of different types of trusts, so we're going to just give a kind of a high-level overview about some needs trust during the presentation. But you want to definitely have a will in place, because essentially if you don't create your own will, then the government will have one available for you and have for your loved ones once you're no longer around. And it's likely not to be a plan that suits your individual needs and goals. So very important for us all to have a will. And then types of trust. Again, we're going to talk about this throughout the presentation, but a special needs trust, and this slide kind of illustrates the fact that it's really creating like a protective bubble, if you will, around assets that you want to earmark for your loved one with special needs. So that's a great benefit of trust, is that they're creditor protected, and those funds in the trust are specifically earmarked for that individual with special needs. And again, different types of trusts, and you also hear us talk about the role of the trustee as a person that your attorney and perhaps your financial advisor, we can always talk to you about how to identify an appropriate trustee, co-trustees, etc. So back to the quiz here. These are some of the basic questions. If you ask yourself and that you've said yes to of these three questions, then you need to go back and consider your plan. So first of all, if you're planning to leave more than $2,000 of assets to your dependent with special needs, you made a plan of care for your loved one, and is your dependent listed as a direct beneficiary of a life insurance or retirement plan? So things that right off the top we want to make sure are addressed. So according to federal law, this has changed in a number of years. If you leave over $2,000 in assets to a person with a disability, they're automatically going to lose their eligibility for government benefits and services. And that's a very low threshold, as I'm sure we can all agree. So benefits, what we're really wanting to consider is that, again, we want to make the plan is appropriate to allow our loved ones to remain eligible for benefits and resources after they leave the school system, because it's really more of an entitlement in the school years. So I know it's hard to think of it that way, especially if you're a parent of a younger child with special needs. But really, those are the easier days, quote unquote, in terms of benefits and services. They're entitled to them until they become an adult themselves at the age of 18. So that's one of the important ages that you see there on the slide. And there's also certain assets that are countable versus not countable toward that asset limit. And other important ages are, for example, ages 20 and 22. Before your child turns 22 years old, you want to make sure that if they have not already, that they're registered having a disability with your state and county. The requirements do change a bit state to state, so I would encourage you to look that up. But I'll give you a couple of resources to refer to so that you can find out the requirements of your specific state. And up to 26 years old is usually how long an individual, a child, can remain on their parents' health care plan. After that, again, you need to kind of consider what options are there going to be to have in place. And with that, I wanted to mention quickly before we transfer over to Pat. Medicaid.gov is a very good website to refer to because of these government benefits do vary by state. Now, if you happen to live in Pennsylvania, you have an additional advantage because there's what's called a Medicaid loophole in the state of Pennsylvania. So that means if you have a child that qualifies as having a disability, which the state helps define, then that child is automatically going to be eligible for Medicaid. Again, that's in the state of Pennsylvania. And Danny mentioned, we're talking now more along the lines of long-term financial planning, but of course always possible that families are dealing with very high medical expenses when the child is very young. And how to best manage that really depends on the specific financial situation of the family. If it may be able to qualify for Medicaid if they are under a monthly threshold. And just for some examples here, I looked up bonds for a household of one, eligible. You can make up to $1,387 a month, all the way up to a household of four. It's $829 per month. So just to give you a benchmark of some of the limits there to qualify for Medicaid. So it's often not going to be an option. And another reason to, as soon as possible, start doing some financial planning. But a qualified financial planner can also look at your expenses. What are your assets? What kind of vehicles are they in terms of retirement plans, savings plans, and they can help you come up with a plan to allocate some of those resources to some of your medical bills. All right. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Pat Bergmeyer, and he's going to go into more of the specifics of financial planning and also along with some of the options that you have when you have a loved one with special needs in terms of financial planning.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you everybody for tuning into the call. As Lee mentioned, she gave a pretty good overview of those three areas of special needs planning. In the 9 years that my practice has been focused on special needs financial and tax planning, I've tried to convey to families that it's more than just having legal documents in place or having some investments and resources. It's tying the two of those together with a plan for loved one to continue caregiving, advocating for them for many years after the day comes that I would imagine many of you don't want to think about, which is the day we're going to pass away. And at that point, now what? What's going to happen to our loved one? Who's going to continue to there, giving them the quality of life that you've always maintained? And this special needs trust. A quick disclaimer: we're not attorneys, so we can't give legal advice. We can draft legal documents, but this is probably the most important legal document that many of you will have to create. This special needs trust. The main purpose of this legal document is to protect eligibility for the government benefits Lori just talked about, and to make sure lifetime care and quality of life are maintained for your loved one for the rest of his or her life. But in the purest sense, what a special needs trust is it's legalese written down on paper, and paper does not guarantee that your child's going to be taken care of. So that's where the financial side, what we do and as financial planners, is to make sure that this trust is eventually funded adequately with the right type of assets in the most tax efficient way, so Uncle Sam doesn't come in on the back end to take potentially 40% of what you plan on leaving to provide for the future care of your loved one with special needs. So I don't know if any of you are aware of this yet or not, but Uncle Sam does not care from a tax perspective if your child has a disability. He is going to tax them this way he would tax you or I, and sometimes even worse, depending on what our funding strategy is for this special needs trust. I also found is the internet, while it's great to get information, it could also give us misinformation. And at the same time, other families, while they're a tremendous resource to get information from so we don't have to go out and reinvent the wheel, sometimes the information that we get from other families is not correct, because I'm sure you found there's no manual for special needs planning. There's no step-by-step instructions to follow, because everything has to be individual. Just like an individualized education plan, your financial plan is individualized. Just because somebody has a child with the same diagnosis, same age, you may not qualify for the same benefits they might. So it's understanding that, and it's making sure that the advisors that you work with aren't trying to put you into some sort of cookie cutter model that they try to squeeze everybody into, is that they make this plan unique to you and your family, focusing on your child with special needs, but not forgetting about the other individuals that are going to fill very important roles for the rest of their lives. So the Googling special needs trust might hit you with different information, but there's a key difference what you really need to find out. Special needs trust, there are two different types of special needs trusts with a very important difference. These are third-party and first-party special needs trusts that you will create proactively, that you'll fund from your assets or from your other family members' assets. Any besides your loved one with a disability can fund this type of special needs trust. That's what the third-party special needs trust is. It's known as a supplemental needs trust. So it can have unlimited amount of assets in it. It can be funded in unlimited amounts per year, and anyone can gift or bequeath assets to it at their death to provide future lifetime care and quality of life for your loved one. Should your loved one pass away and money be left in this trust, it gets on to whoever you want it to go to, other family members, your charities. There is no required reimbursement back to the state. The confusion that find when they Google special needs trusts is they start finding information about these first-party special needs trusts or self-settled special needs trusts. These are actually funded by the assets of your loved one, by him or her. They're created as a result of a medical malpractice personal injury settlement. So we have no choice in that scenario, but the other way we refer to these types of special needs trusts are accidental special needs trusts. A first-party special needs trust is usually funded accidentally after somebody well-intentioned leaves a loved one an inheritance. That inheritance then makes them ineligible for government benefits, and our resulting option to continue benefit eligibility is to create a first-party special needs trust. The big difference between a first and third-party trust is a first-party trust requires a Medicaid reimbursement upon death of the loved one with a disability. Just nobody will have to create one of these with the exception of that malpractice or personal injury. So a third-party special needs trust is the one you're going to want to create. You not only need to create it with the attorney, the logical step is to come up with a funding strategy for it. How are you going to fund it? Is it today? You don't necessarily need to put anything into this trust until the primary caregivers are gone, which is hopefully not for a very long time down the road. That's a stumbling block for a lot of families. They think they need hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars today to start putting into this trust, when in reality, the trust replaces mom and dad. It is you financially when you're gone to get doing the things financially you were doing for your child after the fact. So I want to emphasize the importance of having a strategy to fund it someday, be it our investments, from our sale of properties, from life insurance, whatever the mix that makes the most sense and what you have available to work with. We do need a strategy that we understand, that we're minimizing taxes in that funding strategy, and it's not the default, which is, well, whatever I don't spend in retirement will obviously go to my child's special needs trust. That is not fair to you in retirement planning, and it is not a prudent tax planning strategy, because it could open ourselves up to many gaps and pitfalls from a tax planning standpoint. At the skipping of these things to save time, I know the presentation is available, but identifying somebody that's then going to take care of the distribution of the assets of the special needs trust is the appointment of a trustee. And no pun intended, you do need to trust the individual if you're going to appoint a family member or friend. If you do not have somebody you trust or don't have anybody in general, then you can go out of appointing a corporate fiduciary. There's local banking institutions that have special needs trust departments. There's nonprofit organizations that can be a trustee. So it's aware that there's other resources out there, and these can also be there as a co-trustee for the family member that you have in place. But while important because they oversee the money that's in the special needs trust, what's as important is who's going to care for day-to-day your loved one. Identifying that care provider is a hard decision to make, and when you know there is no guarantee that that individual is going to things the way that you want them to. And there is a document that is helpful from a more emotional stand in this planning, which is called a memorandum or letter of intent. And think of it this way: this is a day life of your loved one. what the routine might be, and what your homes are for them, all the way down to living situations, working situations in the future. This is your document for your child. There is no deadline to finish it because it will evolve as they evolve. It is not a legal document, so it does not have a cost to create it. It does not have any legal bearing, though, from a distribution standpoint for the Special Needs Trust, but it really does help pave the path for the trustee and other family members to know what you would have wanted for one if you were, when you're gone. We don't just want a pile of money sitting in the Special Needs Trust growing and being there. We want it to be growing and dispersed to enrich the life of the loved that you've left behind. So, financial planning standpoint, this is what I do every day, and I've been doing it every day for the past 9 years. In the 12 years I've been doing financial planning, which is focusing on how financial planning is different when you have a loved one with special needs. We talked briefly about that 3-person retirement. When you have mom and dad and a child who may have an unknown support obligation that you're still going to need to provide for the rest of his or her life, then really planning a retirement for 3 people, your style and your child's. And it's potentially 2 generations of income, making sure when you as the primary caregiver retire, you can hopefully stay retired, live the life that you want to and need to live, yet still provide enough when you pass away to continue providing for lifetime care for your adults at that point. We have to approach things differently. Our decisions about how we invest, what we invest in, the type of accounts we put our money in, it's all a little bit different with special needs planning. How we look at insurances, from our health insurance, our disability, our life and long-term care insurance. It's all different because we're planning for somebody's needs that may not go away when they're 22 years old and graduate out of college. It's in most cases, what we found, a permanent need that will never go away. So not only plan for the best case scenario, but protect against the worst. And that's something catastrophic happening to the primary caregiver. And one thing to note, if you have children that are young, if you have children that are, say, higher functioning and we don't know where they're going to be as an adult, having special needs planning provisions built into your plan is not a permanent sentence that they will be always disabled. It is a backup plan just in case the best case scenario does not come to fruition. So, a lot of families procrastinate because their kids are younger or because they have an Asperger's diagnosis or something that may not be as serious of a disability in adulthood, that they wait and see. Well, because we don't know our last day is going to be, that wait and see approach might have devastating results. So getting down to the funding strategy, again, there is no one size fits all to that. Anything you see on this slide, from real estate, investments, retirement accounts, life insurance, can be used to fund special needs trust. On a tax planning standpoint, it really depends on the state that you live in. You got to be aware of the different inheritance or estate taxes that are imposed on these different asset classes. Because we have people from all over the country over the phone, from a federal standpoint, if you're married and a U.S. citizen, you're able to shelter roughly $11 million from this federal government in the form of a federal estate tax. That's $5.5 million roughly each, and you get to combine your exemption. When I started in 2005, it was $1 million of an exemption, and it was a use it or lose it. You could not combine it with spouse back then. This is subject to change. It could change every 4 years with depending who's in office. But the federal estate tax is the big one, which most people think about. If you're in good news or bad news, worth over $11 million, it's roughly a 40% federal estate tax due on the amount above that. It counts everything on this list: property, investments, and life insurance. The state you live in may tax things a little bit differently. There are many states that don't have an inheritance tax when you go linearly to parent, child, or grandparents to grandchildren, which is a good thing. But there's one thing from a federal standpoint that none of us can escape, and it is the tax that is imposed on all of our pre-tax retirement accounts. We've been deferring income taxes on. That deferral ends when we die and we leave those to a non-spouse beneficiary. So your 401ks, your traditional IRAs, 403bs, thrift savings plans, 457s, whatever the pre-tax retirement accounts that you're contributing to, think of them as a ticking tax time bomb. And the lower the taxes, the higher the tax burden is going to be when we pass it on to all of our children. The tax is called income in respect of the decedent. Many people don't even know what that is, but our investment advisors should be explaining it to us. So if we're going to be potentially passing on an account with an embedded income tax of 15 to 40% to our children, is that really the best way to come up with a funding strategy for a special needs trust? Probably not. And our government is dealing with a multi-trillion-dollar deficit, and they will their tax revenue. So the that might be available to our neurotypical wish to even receive a pre-tax account might be limited. And they're going to be paying a hefty tax bill to enjoy the assets that you leave behind. Our children with special needs, this is because we are dealing with benefit eligibility. A pre-tax retirement account is liquidated usually in year one, not all the time, but typically in year one. They will claim it all as ordinary income, pay the income tax on it as what is usually a single taxpayer, which is what your loved one will be, and you're looking at, you know, anywhere from 15 to 40% gone in year one. So again, each of you have different amounts of this stuff we call it. It's just understanding how to look at these things differently when you have a child in your life that has a disability. Skipping things just for the sake of time, so we have plenty of time for question and answers. This slide we stop our presentation on. With the abbreviated workshop today, it's probably information overload. It is a lot that goes into this. I will say it's not rocket science, but you do need to surround yourself by the right team of advisors that are versed in special needs planning. We can't stress the importance of working with an attorney that does special needs planning all of the time, not just a couple times a year, but is versed in the most recent changes and techniques to planning for special needs planning. So here, this attorney is not a dabbler in special needs planning. Any with a law degree can actually do this, which is scary. There's a lot of attorneys that even do estate planning to try to do special needs planning, but if they're not doing it enough, there's way too many mistakes that can be made. Have an attorney that has done some document drafting for you. You want to make sure that is a relationship that you have, not a transaction. So when's the last time you heard from them? Are they updating you on the tax changes? Are they reaching to you when your child's hitting ages like 18 and 21 and 22, making sure you're getting things in place? And out of the estate planning, we don't find out until it's too late if it's not done correctly, and then we're not here any longer to fix it. So making sure the plan is done right versus just simply having it done is very important. So done off legal documents minimally every 5 years is a very prudent idea, because it's an emotional task to undertake to do estate planning. It also has an expense with it, which is why a lot of people don't want to do it again, but it does make sense to revisit it. The legal planning is unique state by state. One thing we always, Lori and I, pride ourselves in is connecting families to resources. So should one connect to attorneys that focus on this in your area, feel free to reach out to us and we can get you connected to some attorneys that are expert in special needs estate law. From a financial standpoint, you usually hear from your financial or investment advisors more often than you would an attorney. But the question is does your investment advisor, understand investment management within a special needs situation? The insurance advisor, do they understand how to look at life insurance and disability and long-term care insurance planning differently with special needs? If not, there might be gaps in your plan, and it could be worth bringing in somebody that is an expert in that area. I will always recommend practitioners that you work with should be a certified financial planner. We as CFPs are always bound by a fiduciary standard. There's a major executive order that was passed on Friday with the Department of Labor changing the oversight of the financial services industry to impose a fiduciary standard. It is huge to make sure you're getting objective advice. And really, second opinion hurt. I mean, we have clients all across the country. The conference call with a client in Seattle tomorrow. So the financial planning advice is not necessarily unique to the state or the county that you live in. It can be done a lot with WebExes and things like this day and age. So at this point, as you know, our first meetings on the phone are really there to complimentary 30,000-foot overview of where you're at to see if it makes sense for us to have a further conversation, if there's any way that we feel we might be able to help. Connecting to attorneys and other resources in the community, educate you on different strategies, tax planning for fund special needs trusts, and again, it's a comprehensive, objective, fiduciary approach that we utilize. So, Sandy, I guess if you want to just get through Here's all our disclosures. None of that was tax nor legal advice, but I guess it's a good time to open it up to Q&A at this point.
Pat and Laurie, thank you both. I'll remind our audience that they can instant message questions they have for our panelists, and we'll try to work them into the conversation as best we can. When your child was diagnosed, you made a decision to change careers in part because of your need to be more valuable to your child. I know that in the case of families with dual incomes, one parent may stop working, work part-time, or take on a job that gives them flexible hours from home. It can have significant financial consequences. Is there any advice you can offer people on how to weigh these issues and work through those choices?
Sure. Yeah. As I mentioned, what often happens is a parent that was maybe working full-time finds themselves either choosing something that's more part-time, and so that they're at least one of them is going to be able to have the flexibility to make sure that their child's needs are met. And that often includes going to a lot of different doctors, therapists' appointments. I know in my case, sometimes you just need to be close to home because you don't know what's going to happen on a given day. I would often get a phone call from the school. My child was, acting out. His anxiety level was high. His behaviors were not best. So I'd have to pick him up from school early. So those are all the things. There's just so many things. A lot of them we can't plan for. So having that flexibility is key. And that's why I decided to eventually focus my efforts on helping families that were in similar situations. Just on a personal level, my son, now that he's 16, he just started this past year. He's in a residential school program at a location that's close to home. So I wouldn't have it any other way personally. I mean, I'm glad that he's close to home. It's a great supportive environment, and he comes home every other weekend. So as time goes by and your child gets the services and supports they need, it may be possible to re-enter the workforce in some capacity if that's the desire. Again, a lot of times that is being part of the special needs community somehow and supporting other families. Hopefully that's helpful, but yes, and that's part of the financial planning is that you may have to, for a while, plan on having a one-person income. And
is that the type of financial planner can help you work through? And maybe more broadly, what are the realistic expectations someone should have, and what range of issues should someone turn to a financial advisor to help them address?
Right. Yes, a financial advisor. Again, we're talking mostly about long-term planning. So the sooner a family starts, even a family without a child with special needs, financial planning is essential, because the idea is to have options open in the future, because we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. So yes, you can speak with a financial planner to help guide you through those more lean years, if you will, because there are definitely certain savings vehicles and types of retirement planning that are more ideal than others when you have a child with special needs. And those are some of the things that Pat alluded to.
How should someone go about? Yeah.
I was going to say, they would usually ask us when they need to start this planning, and we joke with them, look, it's one day before you die. So all things in place proactively before you pass away from an estate planning standpoint, then things will at least be maintained for your child from a benefit standpoint.
How should someone go about finding a financial advisor? Should they seek someone with specific certifications or licenses? Should they find someone who has specific experience working with issues faced by families with children with special needs? If
you want me to answer that one, I would suggest, like I mentioned, a certified financial planner, practitioner, somebody that's gone through a very rigorous training and education process on comprehensive fiduciary-bound financial planning. They're a resource if you want to find financial planners in areas that do specialize on special needs planning within the Academy of Special Needs Planners. Any certified financial planner should be first go-to. Again, if they're not doing financial planning every day with special needs and understand not the financial but the human aspect of it, you not get the right advice.
To add to that's where it's helpful, and a lot of times you'll just find it naturally. If it is an individual, whether it be an attorney, a financial planner, what have you, that is focused on families that have children with special needs, likely they were a parent or are a parent themselves or have a family member with special needs. And speaking to someone that has directly knows or experienced that type of challenge can be very helpful. It's not essential, of course, but it just seems that that's quite helpful because it's hard to understand our world if you're not living it yourself.
One question from the audience had to do with compensation for financial planners. Do financial planners charge a set fee, or is their fee based on how much is invested or managed?
It really depends. It depends on the scope of how you want to engage the financial planner. The industry is really moving towards from an investment management where it's fee-based in advisory accounts, where the advisor's held to a fiduciary standard, where they charge a percentage of assets an advisory fee each year. You're seeing the industry doing away with commission-based investing. Insurance world, they're going to get compensated via commission for product implementation that you choose to do through them. And some financial advisors like us actually charge a flat fee to do financial planning.
You used a term earlier, the retirement planning for three. Multi-dimensional challenge as people who are trying to address this have to consider their own retirement planning as well. Are these best approached individually, or should they be thought of as part of a holistic approach?
Have to be together. Most families, we ask them to raise their hand who thinks they're going to be providing a level of care for their child for the rest of their lives, and those hands go up. So if that care and the support continues to retirement, we need to build that as an expense into our retirement projections, and to have the right type of retirement accounts accessible to us and available to fund special needs trusts that are most tax efficient. So they can't be, they're not mutually exclusive of one another. They have to be looked at together.
You talk about special needs trust. Each trust requires a trustee. How should parents go about select appropriate trustee?
Laura, you want to tackle that one with how you did it?
Sure, absolutely. And that's something that really an estate planning attorney can assist with. I know when I met with my attorney, she kind of walked me through some questions and mentioned some considerations that should be there when you're choosing an appropriate trustee. And just so you know, in general, it's often more than an individual. You can have co-trustees, because ideally you would have someone that's very close to the family and understands the preferences of the individual still needs, what their schedule is, what makes them happy, unhappy, and so usually it's a family member or close friend of the family is one option, and then there are other more professional, if you will, options out there for care management. Corporations do provide a corporate type of trustee that just helps with managing the logistics of the special needs trust and moving assets in and out of the trust once that trust is active. In other words, once funds from that trust are needed to be used to supplement that individual's needs. So oftentimes it's a combination of individuals, but it's good to have some checks and balances, because it's a lot of burden to say, oh, well, to make an assumption that a neurotypical sibling is going to take on that role. My daughter is, she made it quite clear to me that she does not plan to be my son's care provider, and I wouldn't necessarily, want her to have to do that. So that's why the earlier you start talking about and considering options, the better.
Well, how should parents consider the siblings' role and needs when doing long-term planning?
Of course, it's going to be situation to situation matter, because there are, I know plenty of families that say yes, they're planning, their siblings are planning, either one or maybe multiple siblings are planning to have an active role, and maybe if there's more than one sibling, they can kind of define what their various roles will be in supporting their sibling. It's a care management organization, and that's another thing that when you consult an appropriate special needs financial planner that you can expect with, helping connect you with other community resources and organizations that can be there outside of the family to help with the caregiving needs, in the trust, etc. So again, it's a good idea to have like a heart-to-heart conversation with extended family to find out what people are wanting to be, help to the extent that they are willing and can be involved.
I heard it suggested that in planning for the long-term care of a child with special needs, parents should begin with a letter of intent. I know we've covered a lot of territory here. I don't think we talked about letters of intent. Would you agree with that? And what exactly is a letter of intent?
Okay. Yeah, Pat did touch base on that, and a letter or memorandum of intent, as it is sometimes called, is an info. It's not a legal document. It's a document, and we provide templates to families to start putting these together. But it's basically an outline of all the needs of the individual in terms of what are their likes and dislikes. What medications do they take? Who are their physicians? What's their patient schedule? Food allergies. Do they have tactile defensiveness and only want to wear certain types of clothing? Colors that they're drawn to. I mean, it's an endless list of possibilities, but basically all of the nuances about that individual that you would want another person that's involved with their life or in a caregiver role to know. So it gives peace of mind to the parent knowing that should something happen, even for short-term purposes, they have to be out of town for a couple of days, they can give this information over to someone and that their child's needs will continue to be met.
Should a parent seek the assistance of an attorney when creating this? Is this something that has any legal status?
This is not something that has any legal backing. So again, that's something that a qualified financial planner should be able to provide to the family. So that's something else that families should look for and ask about is, what do you know, if anything, about a memorandum or letter of intent?
We'll talk about government benefits for a moment. How do government benefits fit in here? Should that be planning process, and what things will parents need to consider as part of long-term planning?
Well, I can start with that. Yes, the government benefits, that can be a very important part of planning because you want to make sure to take advantage of any of those benefits that might be available to you. Again, there's some, federal-based, but others that are statewide. There's not a whole lot of types of resources out there. So those that are available, you definitely want to be sure that you attain the eligibility for and, take advantage of having them there so that the of the Special Needs Trust is more to be there, again, to supplement any other benefits and services that the individual is receiving. So it's really about maximizing both of those.
A question from the audience about how easy it is to reinstate government benefits if it's lost for some reason. I don't know if either of you can speak to that. I imagine part of the issue is under what circumstances they're lost, but any thoughts on how easily they are reinstated if they're lost?
I can speak to that because I've had to do that myself. And the reason I lost them was just because before I got into this line of work and before I knew any better that I needed to reapply again in Pennsylvania so I can qualify for medical assistance every year. But I do have to apply for it. So if you let that go by the wayside, or if you're talking about Social Security, SSI SSDI benefits once they're, you can lose those resources if you don't keep up with the application process and providing the right type of information required. So it's really a matter of diligence and making sure that you keep really good records and document what the diagnosis, what disabilities are of the individual, so makes it more difficult for them to be denied. That's really a big part of it. And again, if families need help in applying for certain benefits, most qualified special needs planners can point them in a direction, help, in ways that they can't help directly with. There are professionals out there. There's attorneys that help with government benefits, and there's some other like parent advocates, things like that available. So yes, it does depend on how and why they lost the benefits. It's not fun to reapply and have that waiting game start over. So it's best to keep on top of things as much as you possibly can.
A group of parents, I think it's fair to say, at least when it comes to medical care, are accustomed to working with teams of specialists. Is this something they should do as well when dealing with financial planning? We're dealing with issues involving taxes and law and insurance. Do people need to be thinking about assembling a team of advisors? And if so, to what extent should their work be coordinated?
No, I would. Yeah, the team, from at least the financial side of things, you've got enough on your plate to give yourself another job of having to coordinate all of the different financial people in life. It would give you another thing to do, and that's what financial planners, that's what we always view ourselves as, is kind of the quarterback and coordinating the relationships between your tax advisors, your legal advisors, and your banking relationships, your realtors, your mortgage lenders, whoever it might be, to make sure everybody's working together cohesively on your financial planning. I guess on the medical side of things, a different story, Lori, if you want to answer it from that standpoint.
Yeah, on the medical side of things, it can be quite complex, and it's definitely important to make sure that there's and communication among all of the different providers that are involved in managing your child's needs. Because, gosh, it can be from a primary care physician to various specialists, a psychiatrist, behavioral therapy. So, again, and from that regard, you just want to make sure that that the information is shared among them and that everybody's aware. For example, different medications that the child might be taking, different therapies that are taking advantage of, et cetera, that are important in their day-to-day living.
An audience question about the ABLE Act. Is the ABLE Act truly new, or is it a different type of special needs trust? I don't know if you could explain what the ABLE Act is and whether it is new or a different type of special needs trust.
I don't know if the slides are still populating. Actually, the slide doesn't look like it's on here. The ABLE Act is new. Just in our state in Pennsylvania, it was just approved on April 3rd. It depends on state. If you have active ones, but there are many states that you can fund an ABLE account from out of state. But really, the devil's in the details about ABLE accounts. They are not a replacement for everything we talked about. An ABLE account is not a replacement for a special needs trust or financial planning. An ABLE account can simply be a potential complement to a properly drafted special needs trust because of limitations. A special needs trust can be funded with an unlimited amount of resources. An ABLE account can only be funded by $14,000. And a special needs trust can be used for anything that's going to benefit your child with special needs, and an ABLE account can only be used for what the government sees as these, quote, disability-related expenses, end quote, which doesn't like fun and entertainment-related expenses. So just aware of that, and you cannot replace a special needs trust and proper planning with an ABLE account.
Another question from the audience asks, are there any list of financial planners and estate planning attorneys in Minnesota? I'd broaden that to say, depending on where anyone lives, is there a place they can find a list of planners and estate planning attorneys?
Yes, there's two resources that we connect families to that are out of state from a legal standpoint. It's the Academy of Special Needs Planners and Special Needs Alliance. Those two organizations you can search by. The Special Needs Alliance, search by state. The Academy, you can take a step. The Special Needs Alliance is attorney only, and it's in only. And the Academy of Special Needs Planners are both attorneys and financial planners that have to have specific background to be part of that organization. So you go to those.
We'll wrap today's session. Before we go, I wanted to ask each of you, what piece of advice would you offer to people get started? Lauren?
Yeah, well, you can start with small steps. I think that one of the important things is to locate a qualified estate plan attorney. Again, focuses on special needs trust, and there's various ways to locate them. If you go online, you speak to fellow parents that have used different attorneys locally, that's often a good way. But if you go online to their website, you want to make sure that it says they specifically specialize in working with families and creating special needs trusts. It has to be right up there and a focus of their practice. So again, speaking with some of those professionals, I think will help ease anxieties about the process, and speaking to a qualified planner, perhaps again using a fellow parent that has been through the process, or using some of those resources that Pat mentioned to ensure that you're talking to someone qualified. I think doing things like this today, going and running a webinar, going to an educational seminar, all of those things are very helpful because you want to gradually start to take in the amount of information that's out there.
And Pat, any parting advice for how people can best get started?
Yeah, special needs financial planning is not a do-it-yourself type thing. You can't go to Vanguard or to Fidelity or buy insurance online, or God forbid go to LegalZoom to do this. You need to work with the right of advisors. Paying for the advice, yes, unfortunately, all of us that I just named make a living off of doing this, but in quality of advice, this type of planning is way too important to mess up, and you'll be able to do it by doing it on your own.
Well, I'd like to thank our panelists for sharing their insights today, Lori Leathers and Pat Bergmeyer of 1847 Financial. You can find more information on their website at 1847financial.com. I'd also like to thank today's sponsor, Horizon Pharma, for its support of today's webinar, and the staff of Global Genes and Ashley for her work putting together and coordinating today's program. Be sure to join us for our next webinar, August 22nd, on building bridge between foundations and industry. I also want to remind our listeners that registration is now open for the Rare Patient Advocacy Summit, which held September 14th and 15th in Irvine, California. More information on that can be found on the Global Genes website at global.org. I hope you join me every week for our Rarecast podcast, which you can find on the Global Genes Rare Daily or on SoundCloud, iTunes, and Stitcher. You continue the conversation with us by following on Twitter. You can find me at @ESLevine and Global Genes at Global Genes. As you seek to learn more about rare disease and connect with others, I encourage you to explore the many resources available on the Global Genes website. On behalf of Global Genes, I'm Daniel Levine. Thank you all for joining us and being part of today's webinar.